Hey everybody, welcome back to the I Play 2 podcast. I'm your host, Rob Adler. This week, Columbus Fury volleyball player Asjia O'Neal joins the show. From 2015 through 2017, she was named to the U.S. Junior National All-Tournament team. In college at the University of Texas, Asjia was an All-American middle blocker and was a key cog in helping the Longhorns win back-to-back national championships. And in December of 2023, Asjia was the number one pick by Columbus in the inaugural Pro Volleyball Federation draft. Her dad, Jermaine O'Neal, made 6 consecutive NBA All-Star games as a member of the Indiana Pacers. Asjia, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. First question is, how did your interest in volleyball begin?
When I was in elementary school, I had a teacher who was a huge volleyball fan. And this is when I lived in Indianapolis, actually. And she would have after school practice, but not really practice because we were 8 years old. But we would just kind of throw around volleyballs in the gym. And then I moved from Indiana and didn't really touch volleyball until I moved to Texas when I was 12. And Texas is a huge volleyball state. I didn't know that until I got there. But first day of school, I had a couple of girls come up to me and say that I should go to our middle school volleyball tryouts. And at the time, I was super shy, not very outgoing. So deciding to do something like that was way out of my comfort zone, but something just told me I should try out. And I loved it right away, played that middle school season. And then one of my teammates convinced me to go with her to her club volleyball. They have pre-tryout clinics they can go to. So she convinced me to go there. And I guess the rest is history.
Growing up, aside from volleyball, did you have any other interests that maybe you tried before you decided that volleyball was going to be your thing?
I tried a little bit of everything. I moved around a lot because of my dad playing in the NBA. So I went to a school that was a gymnastics and dance school, performing arts. So I did that. I did acting, dancing, singing. I played soccer for a little bit, lacrosse, field hockey. I played basketball for a summer and didn't actually play, just practice. And then went to the first actual school practice and decided it was not for me. So my basketball run was probably the shortest of them all. But I did a lot when I was younger and just wanted to feel everything out and see what I liked the most. But I think once I found volleyball, that was the perfect time for me to just put all my energy into one thing.
How did all of those other things that you did help translate to perhaps improve your skills on the volleyball court?
I don't know if necessarily skill sets translated, but I was definitely a person who wanted to give 110% in everything that I did. And being able to play so many different sports at a young age, I think it allowed me to kind of get control of my body. And I was definitely super tall, super lanky. And when you're so tall, so young, it can make you pretty awkward. But I think for the most part, I had a lot of body control. And especially doing things like gymnastics and dance, it takes a lot of coordination. I feel like just being able to learn different skill sets, different movements from all those different sports, and then bring it to volleyball, I figured out how to play the sport pretty well, pretty quickly.
Once you got to Texas and you were playing volleyball, you said you would join the club team. How did your love keep growing? And from everything I've read, it sounded like you got really good, really, really fast.
Yeah, I definitely improved really quickly. And I think that's what initially helped pique my interest. I realized that I could definitely be good at this. And that first year playing was when I watched Texas win its first national championship in 2012. And immediately I was like, that's something that I want to do. I want to be there. But also just the team aspect of volleyball, how it's so big on culture and the team camaraderie. I had a lot of fun playing. I was playing with a lot of girls that I went to middle school with. And then I started meeting new people from my club teams that were from all across the area. So it was just a really big, solid volleyball community in the Dallas Fort Worth area. And it was just so fun to me. Like you're spending every weekend for 8-9 months of your year going to club tournaments, spending your whole weekend there in the gyms with different people. You're meeting so many girls from across the country. It's just a really cool environment to be in. And when you're that young, finding that community for yourself and having something to add to your identity is really cool, especially when you're improving and getting better and you just see every day, okay, all the work I'm putting in is already starting to pay off. So I was just really excited to see what my future would hold. And I'm a person who sets pretty high goals for myself. And I was actively chasing them even when I was 12, 13 years old.
From that 2012 team, who did you idolize on that team or felt like you could relate to?
So I loved watching Haley Eckerman and Cab Bell. I think Cab Bell resonated with me even more. She's definitely very fiery and aggressive. And growing up, I watched my dad play at a high level, and I watched NBA, and men's sports were obviously seen as ultra aggressive, ultra competitive, talking smack, just doing things like that. That's what I grew up watching, and that's what I saw sports as. And the volleyball world wasn't really like that at the time, besides Texas. And so seeing girls that weren't afraid to be themselves and seeing Black women excel at a sport that was predominantly white at the time. It still is, but it's definitely more diverse now. But back then, Texas really was the only team that had a lot of women of color on the team and allowed them to kind of just be themselves. It was really cool to have that. And they were from where I was from. So just having people like that to look up to, I had them in the distance seeing like, that's what I want to be. That's what I want to do. And having those people as mentors and having that connection that we all went to the same school, I can reach out to them for anything, was really cool to have growing up.
You mentioned diversity on the volleyball court. How important is it for you to be a role model to make sure that diversity continues to grow so that way young players, regardless of background, have better access to play?
Yeah, it's super important to me. Volleyball is definitely a pricey sport, and initially was a sport that was only for a certain demographic of people, and not a vast majority of girls or guys were exposed to it. I was the first person in my family to even play volleyball, to really even know about volleyball. So I kind of taught all of my family about it. I have younger cousins who are starting to get into it and are really seeing like how cool the sport is. But it's so important to me because volleyball can't grow and be the best version of itself it can be if not everyone has access to play it. And with the way that volleyball is starting to explode, the last couple of years I've gone to club volleyball tournaments and I've just seen how, one, there's a million more teams than there was when I was playing, but there's just so many different types of girls that are able to play the sport. You don't have to be this certain demographic or this certain type of person to do it and to do it well. And it's really exciting to see. And I think just also in addition, we're seeing more personalities come out, and not everyone has to act the same cookie cutter way that was expected in volleyball 10 years ago, 15 years ago when I started playing. So it's really awesome to see the growth of the sport. And I'm hopefully going to continue to be a part of how the sport can grow and change in all the ways that it needs to.
Speaking of not acting as a cookie cutter way, you have what I guess I would call a death stare towards your opponents at times.
Yeah.
Do you think, even if unintentionally, that can kind of intimidate your opponent and you can live rent free in their heads?
For sure. It's really funny because myself on and off the court are polar opposites. I'm really laid back, calm, relatively quiet, go with the flow type of person off the court. And then on the court, I'm very intense, very aggressive, very fiery. And I do tend to stare people down sometimes, yell a little bit. But I just think that's something that gets me going. And I know it gets the people around me going. So I do that. And if it does intimidate the other opponent, that's great. That's what we're doing it for. We're trying to get into people's heads. But it's the way I play. It's what really helps me be the best version of myself. And obviously do everything with respect for your opponents. But I just think it makes the game fun. It makes it exciting.
Going a little bit back to your high school career here, you made junior nationals for 3 straight years. Could you kind of tell people who maybe aren't as familiar with volleyball the importance of the junior nationals and just how special it is to be a member of that all tournament team?
USA Volleyball has done a great job with the club volleyball environment. Making nationals every year that I was playing was so cool to do. Each year you kind of go in like, oh, there's an expectation, we need to be there. But doing that and making the gold bracket and playing against the best of the best in the country at your age is a phenomenal experience. You get to travel so much and meet so many cool people. And then being a part of the all tournament team my freshman through junior year was also such a rewarding experience, because even though I didn't win till my junior year, I was still being able to see our hard work is getting recognized, and we're being connected with all these other girls that are also working their butts off every single day. It was a really cool experience to have that and to build that community connection, and getting to college and seeing people like, oh, I remember her when we would play each other when we were 15, 16, 17 years old. And even now, like there's so many connections that you have and you built from those days playing club volleyball. I'm definitely very thankful for it. And I would definitely suggest that if you have the ability to do it, that you should be playing in JOs for sure.
You become friends, but as you get older, you go to different universities. What's it like to play against those friends?
It's definitely an experience. I think once we got to college, it was just really fun to be able to see how everyone was doing and see their success and what's your program like? What's my program like? It was just a lot of fun discussions and comparing and contrasting everyone's experiences. And then once you get to the pro level, I think it's definitely been interesting because there's a lot of friendships. There's people that are my best friends that also play in this league, and I'm having to play against them. I'm like, oh, this is weird because I'm super fiery and aggressive when I play, but I don't know if I want to stare down my best friend. That's kind of weird. So it's really fun just to have that dynamic and to be able to see how far we've come since we were teenagers, but then be at this level and work hard and basically try to outbeat your best friend on the other side. But then afterwards being like, hey, that was a great game, whatever. It's such an interesting dynamic, and just being able to see how much we've grown from our middle school, high school days to now is really rewarding.
What was the recruiting process like for you? Because coming out of high school, you were one of the top recruits in the country.
I definitely had a different recruiting experience. The recruiting process really made me super anxious and kind of nervous. As I said before, I was relatively pretty shy and quiet as a younger kid, and talking to coaches or going to camps really made me anxious. So I didn't really do anything with my recruiting. I played at a club that put us in a lot of really good tournaments and qualifiers across the country. So people were always watching us. And I think immediately I had a lot of exposure, even from my 13th year, my 14th year, like in middle school. Being in Texas, there's always coaches that are going to come see you at these qualifiers and these tournaments. So you always have eyes on you. But I started getting letters in 8th grade, and my freshman year is really when it started to kind of explode, and was receiving a lot of letters from people, or they're calling my club coaches. Okay, where does Asjia think she wants to do for college? There's a lot going on. And at that time, we committed early. There wasn't the rule that there is now where you have to wait till your junior year. So people are committing in 8th grade, freshman year, sophomore year. So all over the place. It's kind of like the wild, wild west at the time. And I didn't necessarily know how to handle it. Like, my dad went through recruiting for a little bit, but then he ended up declaring straight from high school and went to the draft. So he didn't fully go through the whole recruiting process. So me having to figure out, okay, this is where I want to go, I need to make this decision, was kind of new for the whole family. And being 16 years old and deciding where you're going to spend your whole college career is definitely really crazy to think about now, because at the time, at 16 years old, you really have no idea what you want and what you need from 18 to 22, 23 years old. So I went with my gut, and I had narrowed it down to 2 schools, Texas being one of them. And luckily I made the right decision. But everyone has very different experiences recruiting. Luckily, I was blessed to have a lot of exposure and be somewhere where I had a lot of eyes on me all the time, and coaches actively came to see us. But it was an interesting experience, and I'm really thankful for it. And looking back, I wish I would have been more outgoing and really enjoyed every second of it, because there's nothing cooler than deciding basically where you're going to spend your college career at. That's such an incredible blessing to have, to be able to make that decision. But yeah, it was a whirlwind. It ended pretty fast. It ended my sophomore year, and I had my next years of high school to just focus, get better, and be prepared for college.
With being able to focus on just getting prepared, how much were academics stressed? Because unlike basketball, volleyball, well, they do have pro leagues internationally, and now the Pro Volleyball Federation. It's a lot harder to make a living doing that than it is, let's say, how your dad did in basketball.
Academics was definitely always really important for me and my family. From the very second that I started going to school, they said you can do whatever extracurriculars you want, but school always comes first. If your grades slip, we're taking the extracurriculars away. So I always knew that that had to be the utmost importance for me. And wherever I went to school, I wanted to make sure that it was also a good education. I'm not just there to play volleyball. Yes, I can go play pro after and make money, but eventually volleyball is going to be over, and I'm going to have to get a job. And I want the education that I got in college to help me do that. So definitely was super important. I just think that a lot of times it's easy to just focus on the sports aspect, and it's super hard to juggle school and volleyball. In high school, I thought it was hard. It was 1,000 times harder once I got to college. And now just doing volleyball has been a breath of fresh air. But I think people tend to forget how important it is to make sure where you are fits not only your athletic needs, but your academic as well. And luckily for me, Texas did both. I was able to get 2 degrees for free from the university, and came out 2 degrees certificate and 2 national championships. I used every possible resource I could from UT. So worked out really well.
So you just mentioned the national championship. You won back-to-back national championships. You serve an ace to win the national championship. What's that feeling like for someone like me who will never get close to that?
It was an incredible feeling. this most recent year in 23 when we won, it was far from easy of a season. That was the most games that I, up to that point, had ever lost in a season in my life, I think. So it was really challenging. We were coming off winning a national championship. We had a ton of expectations, and there was a lot of tough moments with the team trying to figure out how we were going to make it work and all the things that go into high level sports. But being able to kind of prove everybody wrong and go back to back and then beating the number one overall seed the way we did in 3 was so incredible and so special. And then myself realizing that my last point ever of collegiate sports was me serving an ace to win a national championship, my second one in a row, is so incredible. And that still doesn't seem real. And it's really one of those feelings where obviously everyone's super emotional, but you just reflect on everything that you've done to get to that point, all the work you put in, all the nights where you're up stressed or you're crying or you're upset or you're angry or the losses that you've gone through. Everything comes full circle and you realize that it was all worth it. And it's also just realizing that many people don't get to end points of their careers with a win. And I went my last 2 years of college without losing in the postseason, which is incredible. That's insane to say because there's so many good teams that you play every single night. So everyone loves winning and it's cool to have the glory and all of that. But just realizing that what you've done and what you put yourself through and what you've sacrificed all was worth it in the end is what makes everything just so incredible to experience.
During last season, was there a moment or a match, maybe a loss, that the team and yourself learned from and you said, you know what, that's okay, this will galvanize us and we're on our way?
I think it was definitely our Kansas State match that was in November. We were trying to fight for a top 4 seed because in volleyball, if you're a top 4, you get to host the first 2 rounds and then also the second 2 at regionals. You get to be at home. Everybody wants to be at home. It's nice to stay there, be in your own environment, have your fans, etc. So especially the upperclassmen, we were really stressed about making sure that we're winning in a top 4 seed so we can host. And then once we lost that game, we knew like there's no chance that we are going to get it. 0%. That was our 4th loss of the year, lost to an unranked team. We already knew. So it definitely was one of those moments where it was, okay, this is where we are. We lost. We can't do anything about it now. But how are we going to respond? And what is our team going to look like going into the postseason? Because we don't have time to be upset. We don't have time to bicker and be angry. We just need to get in the gym and really start working. And it would be easy for me to say that, oh yeah, we just went in and it started clicking right away. It definitely didn't. I don't think it was until our Tennessee game, which was the Sweet 16, that the light switch just switched. We figured out, okay, this is us. We found our groove and we were full steam ahead after that point. But that Kansas State loss really was pivotal in the shifting of our team's identity and mentality for sure.
You mentioned the importance of playing at home, and the UT crowds are pretty good. What's it like to play in that environment?
Playing in Greg is definitely an experience. That's something that I think about fairly often. I'm really sad I won't be able to do that ever again. But our fans really ride for us, and we have, maybe this is biased for me to say, but I think it's true. We have the best fans in the country, and they show up for us no matter win or lose. So Greg's special because it holds a little over 5,000 people and it's an older arena, but everything's right on top of you. So it's so loud in there. It's deafening. You can't hear anything. And talking to friends who've been on opposing teams and they've played in our gym, they say they hate playing there. Our fans are rowdy. They're crazy. And it's just so loud and overwhelming all the time. But then when you're the home team, it gives you the most energy possible. Like you feel like you can do anything when you have those fans behind you. I really love the Texas fans. They show up for us whenever, wherever. Even now playing pro, I will always look up in the crowd and I see burnt orange everywhere. So Texas fan base definitely supports you 110% at all times.
That fan base kind of sounds like the Cameron Crazies at Duke in basketball.
Yeah, exactly. It is very similar. Definitely very cool.
My cousin and daughter go and watch games at Greg, and they always marvel at who shows up.
I'm definitely a person who, if people are there watching that I know, I think I play better. I guess you could say it does add pressure, but I think it's a fun amount of pressure. I'd much rather play in a packed arena, even if it's opposing fans, as opposed to having like 50 people in the gym. I think it's so fun to realize, okay, there's all these people watching. They're either cheering for me or against me. And this is my time to show all the work that I've been putting in and really show out and have fun, because that's what you do everything for, is to ball out in games. So personally, I like it, but the answer could depend on each person.
Taking a step off the court here for a moment, you have a genetic heart issue that I don't know if everyone's aware of. Could you kind of talk a little bit about what that's like to live with, the process that you've gone through, and some of the trials and tribulations you've had?
So definitely is a pretty large story to unpack. And every time someone asks me about it, I feel like I struggle to know where to really start. But I was born with congenital heart disease. I had a leak in my mitral valve from the day I was born and a heart murmur. It was something that I always knew about and would go to the cardiologist yearly to do checkups. And I was a really active kid, ran around, did all the things, and didn't have any problems. It wasn't until I started playing volleyball in seventh grade. Obviously, around that time, you're going through puberty, you're growing rapidly, your body's changing. And I don't know if that's why I started to really feel it, but the leak had gotten severe to that point, and they told me that I was going to have an open heart surgery. They're going to have to go in and put a ring around the valve to make sure that it was closing all the way. So I went and had that surgery and ended up being able to come back and finish out the season with my teammates. And from that moment on, I definitely knew that I didn't feel the way that all my other teammates and friends felt. When it would be really intense cardio, I definitely struggled, couldn't do it. Got to high school, we had to do timed miles every week, and I physically just could not do them, or it would be extremely slow. Like a 10-minute mile, like I just couldn't do it, couldn't get my body to perform at that level. And it was just something that I had figured was my new normal. I knew I had that surgery, and they said I wasn't gonna have another one, so I was gonna have to just make it work. And luckily, volleyball's not a running sport. It definitely is cardio, but it's not like basketball. We're just running constantly up and down the court. So I was able to manage it in the best way I could. I get to college, and once you get to college, workouts go from like 0 to 10 really quickly. And first day, we had a conditioning sand workout, and we're literally just doing the warm up, jogging around the courts and doing some dynamic work. And I was just gassed, couldn't finish it, had to stop multiple times. Or looking at my heart rate on the monitor in comparison to everyone else's, and I'm in the red and everyone else is still in the green. So I knew I was not feeling well, something was wrong, and just had to kind of figure out my way. But being a freshman and coming in, being the number 2 recruit, you want to make impact right away, and you want to prove to everybody that they made the right decision picking you. I ended up redshirting just because volleyball, like there was older veterans and upperclassmen in my position that were playing, and it made sense for me to redshirt, not to waste a year. So I ended up doing that. But it's really hard coming in and wanting to just focus on how do I get better. But every single day you're thinking about, okay, how am I going to get through this drill or this drill or this drill? Like I'm getting pulled in and out of practice. It was really hard to deal with. But the spring of 2019, which was my freshman year, it was our last day of spring workouts. And I had to go to my cardiology appointment just for my regular checkup in Austin, and did my tests. My doctor comes in the room and tells me that the leak had become severe again. The ring was too small because I had grown from when I was 13 years old to at that point 19. And they told me I just had to quit. Obviously, that's not something that anybody wants to hear. I just invested a whole year into redshirt and getting better, improving, and just being told that before I even get an opportunity to really play for my school, I had to just stop was earth shattering for me. I was super emotional. I remember calling my parents afterwards, hysterical, crying, frustrated, not sure what to do. And they ended up telling me, we're going to get other opinions. Don't worry about it. We're going to figure this out. Luckily, my dad had a lot of connections from playing in the NBA for so long. So we were connected with the Cleveland Clinic, and we went up there. They looked at some of my tests and they said I'd be fine, finish it out. So I thought everything was great. Went through that summer, still struggled with workouts, would get pulled in and out. It was just, this was Asjia. This is how I manage Asjia. It was what it was. Get to the fall, I'm still really struggling. It's getting worse at this point, and I know it's getting worse, but I also don't really know what to do about it. And I kind of was in denial because being a high-level athlete, you never want to complain, saying you don't feel well, you don't want to pull yourself out, you don't want people to think you're weak, whatever it may be. But I definitely was struggling. And thankfully, I went to a university and played for a program that genuinely really cared about us and put us first, way above volleyball. So everyone from all of our coaches to my teammates to our athletic trainers, our strength coaches, nutritionists, everybody was super helpful with the whole process and never made me feel bad about the situation. Now, I still probably felt bad most of the time because I didn't want to disappoint people and I didn't want to seem weak, but I knew that I have the support around me. So if I really am struggling and need to stop, I could do that. So that was such a blessing to have. But that October, I went home for a weekend and found out that I had to fly to Cleveland because they found something in my most recent tests. Went up there and basically they told me that my doctor in Austin was correct, that the leak had become really severe. And it was at the point where I had to get surgery or I had to quit. If I kept playing at the level I was playing at with this condition, I was going to have detrimental, if not fatal, results. So clearly not easy to hear. And me being me, I was frustrated. I was like, well, I'm going to finish out the season. I don't care. Like, I want to play. It's fine. But the doctors had to really sit and discuss. There's a group of probably like 7 people, whether they were going to let me finish out that season or not. We had about a month and a half left at that point. And thankfully, my surgeon was very confident that because I'd been playing that way for so long, it had at least been 8-9 months that I'd been in that state, that another month and a half wasn't going to do anything. I scheduled my surgery for right after that season in that January. The whole issue is that my mitral valve was leaking because the valve wasn't closing all the way. So blood was going the opposite way through the heart, causing it to work overtime and making my heart enlarge in size and adding more stress and strain to it. And then because that leak started to leak again, it caused a leakage in my second valve and my tricuspid valve in my heart as well. So for that second surgery, they had to go in, replace the ring in my mitral valve, and then add a ring on my tricuspid valve. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but basically what my experience was.
As someone who has a genetic condition as well, although mine with the liver, it's hard to explain to people because they can't see it. It's not like a broken arm. And so it's tough for them to always understand what's going on. Did you ever run into that?
Yeah, I definitely ran into that a lot, especially when I was younger and in high school. A lot of the symptoms that I had were just chest pain, fatigue, dizziness, and just basically inability to carry out the exercises, workouts that I was doing. And it's hard because if I didn't have a cardiac problem, people would just assume like, oh, you're out of shape. You're just not in shape. Keep pushing, push through it. And it was so hard to gauge, is this me being tired or is it I really can't physically do this? And it was super hard to really learn to advocate for myself and say, no, I know that this is not me being out of shape. I do not feel okay. I need to stop. And I really struggled with that. It definitely caused a lot of anxiety because I didn't know how I was going to feel. And I didn't want to have to be that person that's like, hey, I need to pull myself out. I'm not fine. So it definitely is hard because I'm sure I've had a lot of coaches throughout club and high school who probably didn't really grasp the severity of it all. And you're with them for a short amount of time, so they don't really see everything, don't go through all the process that they would. So it definitely was hard to explain that and learn how to explain it. But luckily, once I got to college, our athletic trainer, Deanne, she really helped me learn that I have to stand up for how I feel and really advocate for myself and let people know, like, no, I'm not okay. This is how I feel right now in this instant, and not feel like I had to just push through because, like you said, people don't see what's wrong with me. It's not like my arm's broken, so they can't visually say, oh, she's telling the truth. I had to really make it a point to learn how to do it on my own.
I totally get having to be your own advocate and explaining to people why you can or can't do something at that particular moment. What advice do you have for people who are listening, especially if it's parents with kids who have a genetic condition, for them to be their own advocate?
First off, everyone's journey to being outspoken is different, and it's maybe not going to happen overnight, but just continuing to encourage, whether it's your children or your friends or whoever it may be, that they have your full support, and that when someone feels like they have the support with people around them, that they feel more okay to speak up. I knew that I had teammates, especially when I was in high school or club volleyball, I had teammates that knew what was going on with me, and I knew that they would support me. So it helped with this scenario of me being like, okay, I need to speak up and tell them. But it's just really kind of something that comes with growth and growing as a person. It's not going to be easy at first. It's going to feel uncomfortable. And you might have doubts of, well, I don't want them to think I'm weak. I don't want them to think this or that. But you can't be your best version of yourself if you're not okay. If you say, I'm just going to push through, but you feel terrible, you're not going to play well, or you're not going to do whatever you're doing at the level that you need to. So you just kind of learn that you can't really care what other people think if they still know your situation and choose to not respect that and ignore that and say whatever they say about you, then you just have to leave that up to them, and you can't control everyone's thought process. But at the end of the day, all you have is yourself, and you're your own responsibility, and you have to do what you need to do to make sure that you're okay.
I 100% agree. And I have 2 other quick questions here in regards to the surgeries. The first one is, can you kind of describe the mindset going into the surgery?
I was 13 when I had my first one. And when I first found out I was having it, I started crying. It was emotional. But then I think I realized, okay, well, I can play volleyball with my friends after, so we'll just get through it. And being so young, I think you don't really understand the gravity of the whole situation and how intense of a surgery it is. I knew that I was going to be able to play after, and I had my 3-month recovery, etc. But I didn't really know how tough it was going to be going into it. So I really wasn't super nervous or anxious or stressed about it. I remember right before we went in, I started to get a little scared and got a little emotional, but nothing too extreme. But I think that's just because I was so young, and really I just kept looking forward to the fact that I was going to play volleyball. Well, whatever happens after, like, I'll get through it and then it'll be fine and I'll have fun with my friends again. That was kind of my youthful, naive thought process at the time, but it was nice to not be dreading the surgery going into it.
When you had to have it again, was there any kind of frustration of, I can't believe I have to do this? And then what was the rehab process like? You kind of talked a little about the 3-month process. Can you kind of go into a little bit more detail about that?
I definitely was frustrated when they initially told me, and I think I was just more frustrated on the fact that they initially weren't going to let me finish out the season. In the back of my mind, I knew that something wasn't right and might need another surgery. I wasn't completely sure, and I would kind of just battle with that subconsciously all the time. But I, without a doubt, was getting the surgery. And something that my dad reminds me frequently is that the surgery wasn't mandatory. I could have just quit and just managed how I felt for the rest of my life. But I knew that I'd put so much time and energy into volleyball that I wasn't just going to let it go away. So in my mind, I never even viewed the surgery as an option. Like, it was the only way. So that was how I handled that mentally. But the recovery, the first few weeks are really rough, especially the first few days in the hospital. You can't sit up, cough, move, really anything. Like, you have to really learn how to walk again. You're walking around with a walker. You're getting extremely exhausted after like 50 feet of walking. It's a very humbling experience, especially being a high level athlete and you're doing all these crazy things. And then you go into surgery, wake up, and I can't even sit up in bed by myself. So it definitely is a surgery that kicks you down on your butt really quickly right away. But overall, it's 6 weeks of no exercise at all. I couldn't lift anything over 10 pounds. I couldn't carry my backpack once I got back to school. Had to ride around a little motorized scooter. Couldn't do cardio, nothing. Couldn't sit in the front seat because of the airbag. So was very limited in what I could do for the first 6 weeks. But once that time passes, you can start doing like cardio. So I would run on the treadmill, did really light weightlifting, and just slowly getting my way back into it. And then once you hit the 3-month mark, you can start doing full activity again. And what really takes the most time is for your sternum to heal again. They don't want you playing sports or doing anything where you could have contact because they don't want that bone to break again with all of the fresh wounds around your heart. So 6 weeks, no working out at all. And at 3 months, you're full go to do whatever you need to do.
As a middle blocker, not being able to take a shot to the chest, that could be a problem.
Yeah, definitely. We get hit a lot in volleyball. You're diving, hitting the floor all the time. So definitely would not be able to play volleyball any sooner than that.
During your recovery, especially in the hospital, because I've been in the ICU as well, so I can sort of relate to that too. Was there any kind of moment of levity that just made you laugh or made you realize things are going to be okay? I'm going to be able to get through this?
Really, my whole experience at the Cleveland Clinic was pretty amazing. The nurses that I had, they're world class, really made my stay a lot better, especially in the ICU. I had 3 nurses that would come through in rotation all the time, and they're very lighthearted and have a lot of fun and would joke around with me and just made it as enjoyable as possible. And I think that's a product of, once I got moved out of the ICU, I went to the adult step down unit, and I was surrounded by people that were all in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, a ton of older people. I was the only young person on the floor. So I think once everyone came into my room, they were excited to talk with me and see how I was doing and learn about my life. So they said I brought a lot of freshness to the floor. And I think having people that were excited to come in every day and chit chat with me and watch TV with me, it made the experience a lot better.
Humor is a great way to kind of deal with what you're going through.
Oh, for sure. I definitely needed to laugh, joke, and not focus on the pain that you're in at the time.
I once had an ICU nurse come in and tell me, "You're my favorite patient." And I asked why, and she said, "You're conscious."
That would have made me laugh. That's funny.
It made me laugh too. That helped a lot in that moment for me. And that was kind of my moment of levity.
You're like, okay, that gave me a little burst of energy.
Moving back to the court here, you were the first overall pick in the inaugural Pro Volleyball Federation draft by Columbus. Is there any added pressure on you being that first ever number one pick?
Definitely think there's pressure that comes with that and a lot of responsibility and expectation. I don't think it's any different than expectations I would have placed on myself coming into my pro volleyball career, whether I was drafted first or last. I definitely hold myself to a really high standard and don't like to disappoint myself or the people around me. So having those expectations from others as well definitely adds that level of pressure. But I think from my parents and my coaches over the years, I've learned how to manage that really well. I think I'm someone who does well in high pressure situations and I kind of thrive off of that. Even if in the moment you feel a little anxious or stressed about it, it really fuels me and drives me. So definitely feel that pressure to be who they draft me to be. And I know that pro volleyball is a business and it's not college anymore. And even if you have coaches and organizations that really care about you and respect you, you're paid to be the best version of yourself every single day. So that's one thing that I've learned that I've had to kind of switch my mindset. This is my job and I'm an employee and I need to do what they expect me to do every single day. But I think it's a fun amount of pressure. It keeps you locked in, it keeps you into it, and it keeps you motivated.
What's the transition been like from volleyball mad Texas to Columbus?
Surprisingly, they do love volleyball a lot here. Ohio State has a pretty good program and they've been really good over the years. But Columbus is a sports town. It's really similar to Austin in the fact that the university kind of runs the whole city and they really show up and show out for their sports teams. So I think Columbus is honestly a perfect place to have a new pro volleyball league because we've had people show up every single day, even when we're playing at like 7 p.m. on a Wednesday, when I know kids have school the next day and parents have work, they still show up and are excited and engaged. Even walking around the city, we'll have people that recognize us and get so excited and ask to take pictures. So Columbus does a really good job with making us feel welcome and making us feel part of the city right off the bat. I didn't know what to expect. I'd been here 2 years ago when I played at Ohio State, but I didn't know a ton about the city and the culture. But right away, once I moved here, I realized how much they love their sports here.
What's your favorite place to eat around town in Columbus?
My favorite place is Mandrake. It is kind of like a Mediterranean, but also Japanese sushi style restaurant. And it's at the rooftop of one of the hotels here. It's really cool. It's downtown. The food is 10 out of 10. I've been there like 4 times. So I love it.
And speaking of food in Austin, where was your favorite place to get queso? Because you can start rumbles with that there.
I really liked Chewy's queso, and that's obviously a chain, but I was dairy free for a long time. So I feel like I didn't get into my queso obsession until later on. But there's also this place called Taco Joint that's really good. There's a lot of places. That's a hard question. That is definitely hard.
Next time you go back to Austin, you got to go to Matt's El Rancho and get the queso there.
I have had Matt's. Theirs is good. Matt's is very good.
Since I know you have to run here in a minute, I got two last questions for you. The first one is we've talked about your dad throughout the show, but how important has your mom been in your life?
My mom is going to be very happy that you asked that question because no one ever asks questions about my mom. But my mom has been so important. I have a really close relationship with my dad, but I have a really, really close relationship with my mom. We are best friends. I call her a million times a day. And I know that whenever I call her or text her, like she's going to pick up and be there for me. She's a constant rock for me. I feel like whenever I'm struggling with anything, I can call her immediately and she's going to help me out. She was the one who was running around, driving me to club volleyball tournaments, especially my first 2 years because my dad was still playing in the league. So we're figuring out the whole volleyball world on our own at the same time. And even when she came for our home opener, my first match that I played here in Columbus, we took a picture after and we were talking about it. I was like, we've come a really long way from those club volleyball tournaments. It's so incredible to see how this has played out and how I've had her by my side this whole entire time. My mom definitely is a super mom. She's done it all. She managed raising me and my brother really well while my dad was obviously super present, but playing professional sports as well. So he's in and out all the time. I think she doesn't get the flowers that she deserves. And I try to tell her as much as I can, but publicly people always want to talk about my relationship with my dad because he played sports. But even though he's given me a lot of tips and knowledge, my mom has given me a ton as well. And her being a woman, I think we relate to a lot more things on a deeper level than me and my dad can. So she's my best friend. I get so excited every time she comes up here when I get to go see her. we will spend all day long together. So I love my mom dearly, and she is also the reason why Asjia is the volleyball player that she is today.
One quick follow-up on your mom. Away from volleyball, what's a favorite memory you have with her?
I will say something recently that happened. My mom's birthday is the day after mine. So we would try to spend our birthdays together a lot. But before this year, last year's, we weren't together for our birthdays. So this past year, we went to dinner together. My grandma came in town. It was just like all three girls, and we spent the day together, kind of going shopping, going out to eat, just really having a good bonding moment. That's a really good memory. I was really happy that I got to do that, especially with me leaving college now, and who knows where I'll be next October. Life is crazy. So just having that time with her and really being able to just enjoy it and reflect on everything was really special. But I just love the little things. And I love with both of our lives and how crazy and hectic they can be. Every time I'm home or she comes to see me, we really just get to hang out, run errands together, joke around, get dressed nice, go to dinner.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. That's so cool.
I love just really doing anything with my mom.
And last question is, because they're coming up just around the corner, the Olympics in Paris. What are the chances we see you on the volleyball court there?
The chances are high. The national team for the summer is a group of 23, I think. And they take 3 middles, and there's currently 6 of us, I think. 3 people are going to make it, 3 people are not. But first, we have VNL, Volleyball Nations League, with the national team, which starts in May, and it goes from May to June. So I'll be competing in that with them. And then from those tournaments, they will make the final Olympic roster. So that would be the most insane experience to be able to have, especially fresh out of college. Being able to compete for my country in the Olympics would be the most insane thing that I could ever possibly imagine. So I'm hoping that that happens. But just the past few years that I've done with the national team have been so cool. Really awesome for Karch to want to take that chance with me last year and being in college, but allowing me to be on the VNL roster and compete with them, be the only college girl on the roster was really special, and I learned a lot. So I'm really excited for the summer. I hope I get to make it to Paris and do big things with them, but I know that I'm going to have a long career, and hopefully Karch keeps inviting me. And even if Paris doesn't work out, LA is in 2028. So that would be amazing to play at home and represent my country as well.
Well, hopefully we'll get to see you represent the country twice.
That would be incredible. So we're going to manifest that and speak that into existence.
Asjia, I want to thank you so much for joining the I Play 2 podcast today and talking about your love of volleyball, winning back-to-back national championships, overcoming all of your heart issues, and best of luck this summer on going to the Olympics. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.